Guten Erev Shabbos. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Friday morning. It's not afternoon yet. We're going a little early on Fridays during the winter to help out the folks on the East Coast who are pushed right up against the beginning of Shabbos during the winter months. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house? On a Friday, Paul in the Great Northwest, Yosef in Englewood, Yehudit. I'm back from Budapest and wonderful learning with you live again. Wonderful to have you with us, Yehudit. Bill in Mid-Missouri, Gordo in Scotland, Joe in the Inland Empire, John in Maine, Shandora in the Bronx, Lucy in Minnesota, Steve in New Hampshire. Paula says, sing it, Sal. I never let total lack of musical talent or ability to sing on key stop you. That's my theory. Ella in Southern California, Elanit in Silver Spring, Alan in New York, Marjorie in Georgia, Spencer in Connecticut. Welcome, everybody. Today's episode of AT Daily is number 1800. How awesome is that? Number 1800. This is our 1800th page together. Awesome. Out of 2711, so basically we're 8 days away from being 2/3 done with our journey through Talmud Bavli. How amazing is that? And today's episode is sponsored by my very dear Dia Susi, my Aunt Susan. And of course, she's sponsoring our class in memory of my dear uncle, Tio Roberto, Uncle Robert. We miss you so much. And Dia Susi, Susan Kemeny, thank you for enabling us to share more Torah with more people around the world. May you and Horacio and Karin and all their beautiful families, and all our beautiful mishpacha be showered in blessings, and we say Amen. Let's do it. Going to keep it moving. Trying to keep the class short on Fridays for the same reason we're starting early. Today, opening Mishna number 2 here in chapter 10, the final chapter of Tractate Bava Basra. We're picking this up near the bottom of page 165b, and our daf, our page today is page 166. Mishnah number 2. If it is written in a document that someone owes 100 dinars, which are 20 sela, which is internally inconsistent, since there are 25 sela in 100 dinars, right? So in the contract, they made some kind of a mistake. They said something like, I don't even know what it was. It's like they're saying, we're making a deal for $1,000, which is 12 $100 bills, right? That doesn't make sense. There's an internal contradiction in the document. So then what do? So the holder of the document has the right to claim only 20 sela, the lower of the two amounts. So it's a promissory note. Like the guy who holds the promissory note, he wrote in it, right, you owe me $1,000, which is 12 $100 bills. What's he going to collect? 12 $100 bills? No, he's only going to be able to collect the $1,000, the smaller amount. If it is written that he owes 100 dinars, which are 30 sela, well, then the holder of the document has the right to claim only the 100 dinars. Again, the lower of the two amounts. If it is written that someone owes silver dinars that are, and the remainder of the text where the number of dinars should be specified was erased. So then the amount must be no less than 2 dinars, the lowest amount to which the plural word dinars can be referring. And that is what the creditor can claim. And similarly, if it is written, silver sela that are, and the remainder of the text was erased, so the amount must be no less than 2 sela, the smallest amount that would qualify to have the plural of sela, selas. And if it is written darics that are, and the remainder of the text was erased, So the amount must be no less than 2 darics. It seems like we're getting the idea, same idea 3 times. If it is written in the document above, in an earlier place in the document, that someone owes 100 dinars, and below, toward the end of the document, it is written that the amount owed is 200 dinars. Or if above in the text it is written 200 dinars, and below it is written 100 dinars. So everything follows the bottom amount. If so, why does one write the information in the upper part of the document at all? If we're only going to follow the last mention of the amount, what are we going to do? Why are we writing it in the upper area of the text? Why do we do it? It is a safety measure, so that if one letter is erased from the lower part of the document, thereby rendering it illegible, the information can be learned from the upper part of the document. In other words, it's a little bit ambiguous because one of the letters got smudged. Then you could look higher up in the document, and you could tell that it's the same amount was written twice, but the lower one, which is the dispositive one, got a little smudged. Okay, so we could just get information from the upper one. But if they contradict each other, we follow the lower one. And that's Mishnah number 2. Now the Gemara. The sages taught in the Tosefta 11:2, if a document states that someone owes silver, without specifying which kind of silver coin, so then the amount must be no less than a silver dinar. If it states silver dinars or dinars silver, then the amount must be no less than 2 silver dinars, the lowest amount to which the plural word can refer. If it states silver in dinars, now here's something a little unexpected. If it says silver in dinars, so then the amount must be no less than 2 golden dinars worth of silver. Now, this was a baraisa. So the Gemara analyzes the beginning of the baraisa. The master says if a document states that someone owes silver without specifying which silver coin, so the amount must be no less than a silver dinar. And the Gemara asks, but why not say that the intention of the word silver is not referring to a coin at all, but rather to a small piece of silver, some kind of ingot? And Rabbi Lazar said that the case of the baraisa is where the word coin is written in the document. Okay, so we have reason to believe that the silver refers to a coin because elsewhere in the document it mentions a coin. So the Gemara asks again, but why not say that the intent is not a dinar, but rather smaller coins such as perutot? And Rav Papa said, the halacha, the law of the baraisa, is stated with regard to a place where silver perutot are like pennies, where silver perutot do not circulate. Right? As every time we've encountered that coin, the peruta, or plural, perutot, it always refers to copper coins, right? The lowest denomination that there was. Think pennies. So maybe there were silver perutot, which would be worth a lot more than the copper perutot, but that was unusual. So unless that was specified, we'd have no reason to think that that was what was intended. So the sages taught in the continuation of the baraisa, if it is written in a document that someone owes gold, right? It doesn't say gold coins, gold dinars, it just says gold. Well, then the amount must be no less than a golden dinar. If it is written golden dinars or dinars golden, what do we think? The amount must be no less than 2 golden dinars. If it is written gold in dinars, the amount must be no less than 2 silver dinars worth of gold. Much better to have silver in dinars, which should be 2 golden dinars worth of silver, than to have dinars, right? Dinars in silver. Gold in dinars, which would mean 2 silver dinars worth of gold. That would be a very small amount of gold. Now, the sages taught in the continuation. Wait, I think I just said that. Now, the Gemara analyzes the beginning of this section of the baraisa. And the master says, if it is written in a document that someone owes gold, the amount must be no less than a golden dinar. And the Gemara asks, but why not say that the intention of the word gold is not to a coin at all, but rather to a small piece, an ingot of gold? And Rabbi Lazar says the case of the Baraisa is where the word coin is written elsewhere in the document, just like we saw with the silver. And now we're on page 166a at the top. And the Gemara asks further, but why not say that the intent is not a dinar, but rather smaller coins, such as perutot? And the Gemara answers, people do not make perutot of gold. Silver perutot are rare. Gold perutot do not exist. And the Gemara continues analyzing this Baraisa, which states, if it is written gold in dinars, the amount must be no less than 2 silver dinars worth of gold. And the Gemara asks, but why not say that the document is speaking of 2 golden dinars worth of pieces of gold? And Abaye says the interpretation is also possible, but the guiding principle in all interpretations of ambiguities is that the holder of the document is at a disadvantage. Right? The holder of the promissory note, let's say, who is owed money, he's at a disadvantage. When they initially made the loan and drew up the document and the promissory note was going to be for his benefit so that he could later bring the promissory note and get paid according to the amount written in it, he should have been careful to make sure that that document expressed exactly what he was entitled to receive. And since it was ambiguous, he's at a disadvantage. If there's 2 possible answers of what was meant by that ambiguous term, he, the holder of the promissory note, is going to receive the lower amount. Rav Ashi said in reply that the text of the Baraisa should be amended. In the first clause, the case is that the scribe wrote silver in dinars, using the plural form dinaraei, which refers specifically to golden dinars. And in the latter clause, the case is that the scribe wrote gold in dinars, using the plural form dinarin. Right, so this would be 2 ways in Aramaic to describe the word dinars, plural of dinar. One way is dinarin, the other is dinaraei. Right? And dinaraei refers to golden dinars, and the other one, dinarin, refers to silver dinars. Right? We wouldn't know that because we don't speak Aramaic every day, but they knew that. Now, the Gemara supports its assertion that there is a difference between these 2 plural forms. And from where do you say that there is a difference between the words dinaraei and dinarin, and that dinaraei means gold and dinarin means silver? This is as it is taught in a Mishna, Tractate Karatot 8a. In the case of a woman for whom there was uncertainty with regard to 5 births, and likewise a woman for whom there was an uncertainty with regard to 5 irregular discharges of blood from the uterus. Okay, let's go back a second. What does it mean that it's uncertain whether she had 5 births? I think a woman would know if she had 5 births or not. Answer, she may have had 5 miscarriages, and it was uncertain whether, at the stage of development, the fetal development, if, the stillborn was developed enough to be considered, a dead baby, or if it was still so undeveloped as to not be considered a dead baby. So, in which case, if it was a stillborn and considered a dead baby, then she gave birth. But if the miscarriage happened earlier in the process, then she didn't give birth. Why does it matter? Because when a woman gives birth, she becomes obligated to bring certain offerings in the Holy Temple. Now, right away you're thinking, and I've thought about this before, were women in ancient Israel, they give birth, and let's say they live, a week's walk away from Jerusalem, maybe 2 weeks. And how soon do they have to go make that journey to bring the offerings? Well, the answer is they're going to have to bring those offerings before they can enter the precincts of the Holy Temple when the temple is standing. So basically, the next time they're going to make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem for a holiday, that's when they would bring those offerings. It's not like they have to do it right away. But they would have to bring those offerings before they can bring other offerings and before they can enjoy sacrificial meat, right? So when there's a peace offering is brought and some of that, the blood is sprinkled on the altar and then the rest is eaten, maybe during the Pesach holiday, or certainly if she was the wife of a priest, who might get to partake of certain sacrificial meats that are reserved for priests and their families. I know there's some for the priests. I think their families can eat of that too. At any rate, then she has to bring these offerings. So the point is, what they're going to talk about now is, if she had 5 births before the next time she came to Jerusalem and was going to bring offerings, but they were uncertain, exactly like how much, which of those were actually count as stillborn children and which don't. So that was the uncertainty. So then what happens? And also if she's had uncertain discharges, which would render her a nida. So let's talk about this, or actually render her a zava, which is a little bit different than a nida. But let's see. So this is as it is taught in that Mishna, Tractate Karatot, in the case of a woman for whom there was uncertainty with regard to 5 births, and likewise a woman for whom there was uncertainty with regard to 5 irregular discharges of blood from the uterus, known as ziva. So she brings 1 offering, and then she may partake of the meat of offerings. She just brings 1 offering. It's going to cover those 5 uncertain births or 5 uncertain discharges. And the remaining offerings are not an obligation for her. And if she has, in her case, 5 definite births or 5 definite discharges of azava, then she brings 1 offering. And then she may partake of the meat of offerings, and the remaining offerings are an obligation for her. Now, you might think that she would become obligated to bring the offerings of a woman who's given birth for each one of those 5 births, if they were definite births. But no, she can cover all of them, all the 5 births, with the 1 set of offerings. So the Mishnah continues, there was an incident where the price of nests, i.e. pairs of birds, stood in Jerusalem and this is why it's being brought up now, the price of a pair of birds to bring as an offering in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem when the temple was standing, it stood at golden dinaraei. Right, so golden dinaraei, so sounds like at least 2 golden dinars, and dinaraei seems to be referring to gold, the plural that we use when it's gold. So the price stood at golden dinaraei. Didn't say 2, it just says golden dinaraei, so we know it's plural. We don't know how many, so we assume it's 2. And why? That's very expensive, as the great demand for birds for the offerings of a woman after childbirth and azava led to an increase in the price. Baby boom. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said, right, so who was the Nasi at that time, the leader of the Sanhedrin and basically the spiritual leader of the nation. Rabban Shimon, the rabbinic spiritual leader, as opposed to the Kohen Gadol bringing offerings in the temple. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said, I take an oath by this abode of the divine presence, meaning by the presence of God in the holy temple, that I will not lie down tonight until the price of nests will be in dinarin. So he's going to bring it down from 2 golden dinars to 2 silver dinars. That's how we know that dinarin refers to silver and dinaraei refers to gold. But in terms of the story, he's like, the poor people are having trouble. They can't afford to bring these offerings. And he wants to get that price down. What did he do? Ultimately, he entered the court and he taught. A woman for whom there were 5 definite births or 5 definite discharges of azava brings 1 offering. And then she may partake of the meat of offerings. And the remaining offerings are not an obligation for her. She can discharge all her obligations for all her births with 1 set of offerings, not 1 set of offerings per birth. Now we're on page 166b. And the Mishnah concludes, and as a result, the price of nests stood that day at 1/4 of a silver dinar, as the demand for nests decreased. And it is clear in the Mishnah that the term dinaraei indicates a higher value than the term dinarin. Next subject. The Mishnah teaches, if it is written in the document above that someone owes 100 dinars, and below it is written 200 dinars, or if above in the text it is written 200, and below toward the end of the text it is written 100, So everything follows the bottom amount, right? The text, when it got closest to being the end of the text, and then when the witness is signed, we follow the amount lower down in the text of the document. If so, why does one write the information in the upper part of the document at all? It is a safety measure so that one letter is erased from the lower part of the document, thereby rendering it illegible. The information can be learned from the upper part of the document. The sages taught in a Baraisa in the Tosefta 11.4, information concerning what is written below may be learned from what is written above if the lower text is missing one letter, but not if it is missing two letters. In that case, in the event of a discrepancy between information written above and information written below, the document is not valid, right? So if one letter became illegible, okay, so we can look up above, the same amount seems to be written there, and clarify what the amount was. But if two letters became illegible in the final rendering of the amount owed in that document, then the document is not valid and the holder of that document will not be able to collect. For example, if the name of one party is written as Hanan below and Hanani above, it may be derived from the word Hanani written above that the party is named Hanani. And similarly, if a name is written Anan below, it may be learned from the name Anani written above that the party is named Anani, meaning that little yud at the end of Hanani or Anani got smudged, got erased. Okay, but it doesn't mean that that the borrower does not owe the money to the lender who is Anani or Hanani. It's just that the last mention of the lender's name in the text got a little bit smudged, and we can learn it out from where it was written properly up above. But if two letters get erased, we're not going to be able to do that. Now the Gemara asks, what is different about two letters missing that the Baraisa teaches that the name written below cannot be corrected from the name written above? If two letters are smudged, it's no good. Why? And the Gemara suggests it is out of concern that perhaps it will occur by chance that there is a four-letter name and the omission of two letters would be half of the name. And for this reason, the sages extended this concern to all cases where two letters are missing. And the Gemara challenges, if so, the same could be said when one letter is missing as well, as perhaps it will occur by chance that there is a person with a two-letter name, and the omission of one letter would be half of the name. And the Gemara explains, rather, this is the reason that when two letters are missing, the name written below cannot be corrected from the name written above. The concern is that perhaps it will occur by chance that there is a three-letter name, and the omission of two letters would be the majority of the name. And the sages applied this concern to all cases where two letters are missing, and that's why if two letters are missing, document rendered invalid. Now, the Gemara continues to discuss the discrepancies between the information written above and below in a document. Rav Papa said, it is obvious to me that if a document states above that one owes a sephel, which is a type of cup, and below, further down in the document, it states kefel, a type of garment, well, then everything is determined by the information written below. In this case, there is not a missing letter at the bottom, but an altered letter. Therefore, the information written below is not corrected from the information written above. And here they have an illustration, right, of these two letters, the kuf and the samech. Right, and you can see that the kuf and the samech are very similar to each other. The one with the longer extension, right down, that's the kuf, and then over here is the samech. Right, so it would only take that this little extension below the letter somehow gets smudged or erased, and then the kuf becomes a samech, and then it would change from kefel to sephel. Right. And, a type of cup, unless it's made of gold, is not going to be very valuable, whereas a type of garment might well be much more valuable. So in this case, what are we going to do? Are we going to say that because down at the bottom it says sephel, but up above it says kefel, that it must be that letter got a little bit damaged, and therefore we should learn out from the upper mention of the word? And it sounds like, no, we don't. We just take it the way it is in the lower down mention in the text. So Rav Papa raises a dilemma. Well, what if it is stated kefil above and sefel below? The difference between the two words is that the former begins with a kuf, whereas the latter begins with a samech. And the orthographical difference between these two letters is a single stroke that extends downward, as the omission of the extension of this stroke would change a kuf to a samech. So Rav Papa's dilemma is, are we concerned for the possibility that a fly landed on the stroke of the kuf, removing the ink and changing it to a samech? Or are we not concerned with this possibility? And the Gemara comments, Teku. This dilemma stood unresolved. I'm almost done. Questions or comments? Get them in now. The Gemara relates there was a certain document in which it was written that the amount due was 600 and a dinar, without specifying which denomination the 600 amount referred to. So Rav Sherevia sent this question before Abaye. Does the holder of the document collect 600 istira and a dinar? An istira is another name for a sela, which equals 4 dinars. Or is he perhaps entitled to collect only 600 perutos and a dinar? A peruta being a small fraction of a dinar. We don't know what the 600 refers to. And Abaye said to him, remove the possibility of 600 perutos, since people do not write large numbers of perutos in a document, as they instead combine them into larger denominations and change them into a smaller number of dinars. Therefore, what can you say? The highest and lowest remaining possibilities are 600 istira and a dinar, or 600 dinars and one more dinar. And the guiding principle is that the holder of the document is at a disadvantage, and the lesser of these two values is assumed. So if he didn't mean that it was 601 dinars, if he actually meant it was 600 istira and 1 dinar, he's out of luck, because he's going to lose 3/4 of the amount that is owed to him if he meant 600 istira. That is where we're leaving off. I'm going to take a couple of questions, but a reminder that I'm away this coming week with a family obligation, and so no class until 1 week from today. With God's help, I'll be back next Thursday and should be teaching on Friday, a week from today. Okay, 2 questions. One from Bill. As I point out, whenever you give us your classic self-deprecating view of your own singing ability, speaking as someone who is, I'm told, pretty good at it, you are better than you think. You're so kind, Bill. Thank you. And Sharon, in Hebrew, dinaraei would be what is called smichut, meaning it is plural with a descriptive adjective like Bnei Yisrael, instead of the typical plural of im. I guess it could be similar in Aramaic. Sounds good to me. I am just working my way through, getting my Hebrew up to a better level. As I've mentioned a few times, it's such a wonderful experience reading the Torah portion each week in Hebrew, even with my limited ability, but just, working through every word. And I'm definitely getting better at it each week. But like, for instance, in this week's Parsha, and how Jacob is really having all kinds of difficulty with his uncle Laban, or Yaakov and Lavan, and how Yaakov, finally says, I got to go my own way, and I don't want to go out with no money, now that I've been working for you for 20 years. And there's the whole incident with the speckled and spotted and otherwise colored sheep and goats. And and then he has to be very tricky because his uncle has really tried to rip him off so many times. So when you're dealing with unscrupulous people, you have to protect yourself, and you have to be honest. You have to not be immoral yourself, but you have to protect yourself from such people and understand how they're trying to operate on you, right? And Yaakov protected himself. And when you read it in Hebrew, you see a few interesting things, like the word sachar, which usually we talk about as meaning reward. But here it's often translated as wages. Now, obviously those are similar, right? When you do work for somebody, you get something in return. But what you're getting in return, it's quite different to characterize it as wages or as reward, right? And since the same word can be translated either way, it carries both meanings. In English, we lose that subtlety and that nuance. It's the same word. So even when it means wages, it carries the meaning of reward and vice versa. And you get this sense like that Yaakov, at a certain point, he had to act naive so that his uncle thought he was taking advantage of him, whereas he knew what his uncle was up to, and he was able to get what was coming to him so that he could take his family on the road back to the promised land, not broke, right? But with some means at their disposal. That's just, the one example that came to mind now. That's what I've got for us today. And with God's help, we'll be together again a week from today. And in the meantime, may you all be blessed. May we all be blessed with a sweet, uplifting, healthy, elevated Shabbos. Good Shabbos.